Are you tired of the same old dating scene in your local area? Do dating apps leave you more frustrated than fulfilled? And what about those magical travel romances? Why do they seem to happen so effortlessly? What if I told you the secret to falling in love is off the apps and into the wide expanse of the world? This month, we're bringing you our Passport to Love series, an exciting collection of stories from around the globe where travelers found love in the most unexpected places. Stay tuned. Love and adventure awaits. Hi, I'm Kelly Tolliday, founder of Transform with Travel, and your trusted guide to life-changing adventures. Here, we help you dream big, plan smarter, and embark on your next journey without stress or overwhelm. This isn't just about booking trips. It's about reimagining what's possible for yourself, one adventure at a time. Today, we're bringing you one step closer to your greatest travel dreams. So buckle up because we are about to take off. Welcome to the Transform with Travel podcast. I'm Kelly Tolliday, and we are hosting our Passport to Love series, and we're sharing stories of everyday travelers finding romance on the road. We have Salecia Host here on the podcast today, and her story is one that spans the entire world. So I'm really excited to hear your story. Welcome to the show, Salecia.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you so much for having me. I think this is a beautiful idea for a podcast, and I love my story and I love telling it. I think it's quite unique. We haven't really met anyone in our same situation, and it definitely spans a lot of countries, a lot of continents, and a lot of years as well.
I love that. Well, let's get started. If you don't mind, can you share what was happening in your life before you met your partner? Like what led you to that moment?
Sure. So before I met my now husband, I had almost graduated from university in Australia, where I was born and grew up. I'd done a little bit of traveling, the backpacking around Europe out of high school and things like that. And I had fallen in love with Israel. And so to get back to Israel at the end of university, I decided to enroll in some optional units at Tel Aviv University and did that. Went back to Israel with a really good friend, and we lived on a kibbutz that we had visited as young travelers and had friends there. And that's where I met Steve. So I had just finished those university studies. That was a year at Tel Aviv University. And through mutual friends, we literally met on a garden path and pretty much fell in love instantly. Within a couple of days, we were living together, and we've been inseparable ever since then. And that was the end of March in 1998.
Wow. Okay, so let's back up a step.
Sorry, 1999. Oops. I always get dates wrong. They're actually embossed inside my rings, so I don't
never forget. You're like, wait a minute, let me just check my ring really quickly. Let's back up a step. So you're walking down a garden path and you run into this man. What's going through your head? Like, what do you first notice about him? When you say you fell in love instantly, what was that like for you?
Okay, so I was expecting to meet him. He had also been in the same kibbutz. Apparently, we had met years earlier in a quick trip that I did back to Israel. I don't remember meeting him. So he'd been a volunteer. He had come back to Israel to make some money. He'd been living in the United States from South Africa and was coming to the end of a professional tennis career where he made it enough to get into big tournaments, but needed to self-fund his travel and things like that. And so I knew he was coming to the kibbutz and was going to be staying and was someone I was going to meet. And so I had that preconceived sort of, South African tennis player. That's someone I've never met before. And it was just an instant connection. Classic movie. We walked towards each other, locked eyes, and sort of was like, okay, that's it. There we go. Pretty much. Took a couple of days and a late night party, but we got there.
There's always a late night party somewhere in the mix, right?
I hosted the party, so I might have had something to do with it.
I love that. And you mentioned in your story when we were chatting before that you guys moved in after a couple days. Can you talk about that? Because usually you hear maybe a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, and that seems fast for a lot of people. So what does this, I know you guys are in a different situation because you were both on the same kibbutz. Can you explain actually what is a kibbutz? I've never heard of that before.
A kibbutz is a collective community established, long ago when Israel came about. And it's a haven for travelers who want to go and volunteer. So you can go as a non-Jewish, non-Israeli traveler and you can work. And so I had done that in the past, volunteered to work, and the kibbutz provides you food and accommodation and a community. And it's a beautiful way of life. It's really simple, a lot of collective living, collective eating. Even the laundry's done all at the same place. And yeah, very relaxed and a really nice place place to land as a traveler. And so having had that experience prior, both of us were using the kibbutz now as a place to live and reconnect with that community, a farming community. I picked avocados. Steve was working in the paint factory. We've both milked cows, that kind of thing.
That kind of experience will bond you for life. Milking
Yeah,
cows side by side. So then what happened after that? You guys meet, you're like, okay, so there's something special here. We don't quite know. We're living in close quarters. We're working in close quarters. Talk about the next couple days, couple weeks, couple months that follow that. How does your relationship blossom from there?
So it was really after the late night party. It became the next day, and he went and got his things and moved into my apartment. And there was just a knowing and understanding from that moment on, this is it. I don't think we questioned it or even discussed it. It was just an understanding between the two of us. And so we stayed in Israel for about another 6 months. And then Steve wanted to get back to the United States. He wasn't sure if he was going to continue playing tennis or just get into coaching. He'd been offered some opportunities. The United States was never on my radar for travel, but he was. And we traveled through Turkey. We spent a couple of months in Turkey together. We went back to South Africa, where he's from, connected with his family, then went to Australia and connected with my family, and then made it to the United States. And actually, when we were in Turkey, I don't know if I shared this earlier, in Istanbul, they had the worst earthquake on record, 7.5.
Wow.
And we were there and we experienced that as a disaster. And our families connected, and this is outside of the internet and cell phones and things, they connected knowing that we were traveling there together and we were not able to connect home. So we've had connections to things like that, these big world shared experiences along our way as well that have really brought us together.
We unfortunately have that in common. I was in a 7.0 earthquake in Indonesia, and same thing. Both my husband and my family had met prior, and they knew each other, but we didn't have cell service. We didn't have any way to connect, so they were kind of keeping each other in the loop. That experience as well is something that does make or break a couple. You know, the trauma of that as well is how do we navigate this as a new couple, as an early couple, and so young as well. And so when you mentioned that you went back to South Africa after Turkey and then you went back to Australia, how was that meeting of the families? What was going on in your family's minds at that time?
It was interesting. Both our families really embraced the other. I think my family were a little bit weary, like, who is this person suddenly that is now going to take our sister, our daughter off again, because we came to Australia with the knowing that we were going on to America. And his family were amazing. Actually, his previous girlfriend wasn't their favorite. So that bode really well for me. And we still share a pretty close relationship. He's got sisters, I've got sisters, so we bonded over that as well.
And then you guys decided to go back to America so he could pursue either his coaching career or continue on with playing tennis. There's a lot that has happened between then and now. And I'd love to kind of just touch on before we get into the rest of the story where you're spanning multiple states and continents and countries. What was that process for you in terms of deciding? I mean, you guys decided early on, we're going to be together, we're going to make it work. But then there's this added layer of visas and different countries' regulations, especially in America is tough. I went through that with my Australian husband. I mean, that also adds a layer of seriousness and responsibility to a relationship that was once based on adventure and travel and passion and all of that. So how did you guys manage kind of the reality of, okay, we both have different passports living in a different country? How was that process for you guys?
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not cheap. It's definitely testing on a relationship. We've been in all kinds of visa situations in the different places. You know, we're 20 odd years into the United States and just on our second 10-year green cards and managing that process. So it is a commitment. It does make you committed when you decide to jump into immigration with someone. You know, it involves bank accounts and taxes and lawyers and all of those really heavy things. So we did all of that. And then actually we were in Connecticut and just out of New York City when 9/11 happened. We'd just gotten engaged. We were planning on a big wedding in Bali, between a central place between all of our families, and everything got put on hold. So we had to cancel the wedding. We got stuck in place. There was no travel, as everyone knows, but it also impacted long-term visa processes within the United States. We got sort of caught in this loop where we couldn't leave for a couple of years until we got some kind of status. We ended up going to Vegas, and that's where we got married with Elvis, and that ended up being on a TV show, a reality TV show in the United
Oh
States.
my gosh, what was it?
It was called A Wedding Story on TLC, one of the really
Oh.
early, reality TV shows. And they came out to Vegas and they filmed us being a couple from two different countries in a different country with Elvis, doing everything really unconventionally.
That's hysterical. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so that was amazing. That was great and wonderful. And we always thought we'd have another wedding and have the wedding, and we didn't, which is totally fine. And yeah, so that kept us in place. We stayed in the United States for a few years after that. And then once we got our first round of visas and things, we had moved 3 states and 3 kids and a couple of dogs and a couple of houses bought and sold and renovated. And so we moved from Connecticut to New York, from New York to Massachusetts, from Massachusetts to Michigan. And yeah, our third child was about 6, I believe, 5 or 6. And all of this was Steve's coaching career. I had studied to be a teacher and had done relief work and done long-term sub work in the United States, did my master's, and just had that big thesis to write, which I just kind of couldn't get with 3 little kids and everything else going on. And then Steve got a call to move to Finland. And so we picked up the kids, we sold our house, we packed up our lives again and took a leap of faith and moved from this great big newly renovated house in Michigan to a tiny little apartment in Helsinki. And on day 3 in the country, found out there was no place in English-speaking schools for our 3 children, and they had to go into Finnish
Oh
schools.
my gosh. How old are they at this stage?
At this stage, they were 6, 8, and 11.
Wow.
Yeah, with no comprehension. In fact, I just found a Christmas card that my 11-year-old wrote his teacher at the end of that first year saying, "Thank you for teaching me a language I didn't even know existed until I moved here." So they became very quickly fluent in Finnish. I did not. I tried my hardest, and it's a very difficult language.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they speak Finnish. We were there for 5 years in the school system, sitting through assemblies and parent-teacher conferences in different languages going, we have no idea what's going on. So that's another connection as well, right? When you move to a country where you don't speak the language and your kids are enrolled in a school system that you don't understand, we came to respect it very, very highly. I ended up finishing my master's and writing my thesis on Finnish education.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's another make or break, navigating a small apartment and a city with, signs in funny words and getting around and creating a community and meeting people and creating a life there. And we did that, and it was beautiful for 5 years. The visa process, again, that's again getting visas and living on, a little bit of a knife's edge, because if the visa gets denied, then what do you do? And that's sort of the situation that we ended up in. My husband's work visa changed and he went out as an independent contract, and we didn't know if it was going to be approved or not. So as a safeguard, I looked into international education, went to a job fair in London, got hired by a school in China, and we were like, okay, what do we do? Do we stay in Finland and hope the visa comes through, or do we move to China? Well, we moved to China.
Oh my gosh. I was like, I think I kind of know where this story is going at this stage.
We did. That was in 2019. Beautiful school, beautiful city just out of Beijing. English education for the kids. Turns out our youngest, my daughter, has an aptitude for languages, and she learned Chinese pretty quickly.
Wow.
The boys a little bit. In the meanwhile, our 2 sons, the oldest became a very high-level soccer player, football player, and our middle son went after tennis like his dad, and they were playing at a national level in Finland and a national level before that in the United States. We get to China, which looked really promising, and actually, as a foreigner, was not promising at all. So almost within a few months of arriving in China, Steve said, I've got to take the boys out of here for their sports. And then COVID hit, and then we were on lockdown. The whole country was shut down.
Love is in the air, especially if you're out exploring the world with someone special. From sunsets in Italy to steamy nights in the mountains, Best Day Brewing is there to keep the romance brewing. With craft non-alcoholic beers that are chock full of flavor with none of the booze, Best Day Brewing supports your romantic getaways by keeping you present and energized for every moment along the way. For Valentine's Day and every day, raise a glass to hoppy endings. Learn more and shop at bestdaybrewing.com or at bestdaybrewing on Instagram. Cheers to your best day yet.
Steve at that stage was traveling with some high-level tennis players from Finland, one who is now playing in the top 10, and nearly got locked out of China. He got back in and ended up, during the whole lockdown process, getting a job at a club in Denmark. So he took the boys to Denmark. We decided to make this big, crazy decision in the
Wow.
middle. My daughter loved China. I loved China. The school was amazing. Our life there was amazing. So we decided to stay with the idea that we would see each other in school holidays. And for 2 years, school holidays didn't happen because of COVID.
Wow.
So we were separated as a family for 2 years and just had this daily, twice a day FaceTime calls of connecting in. And my husband and my two kids lived in a whole other country, two apartments, like went to a different school, all of this whole experience while my daughter and I stayed in China.
So
And
can
then
we talk a little bit about that? Because you mentioned at the very beginning when you said, we met and then we haven't, like, we've been inseparable since. What was that like for your relationship to be apart for that long? I mean, of course there's the kids to consider, but we're really focusing on the relationship here because a lot of people do have to spend quite a bit of time apart when they are dating or marrying a person who is from another country. And it is something that you have to consider is there might be time apart. Sometimes you think it's for visa reasons, not because there's going to be a global pandemic shutting you out. But what was something that I guess helped you guys during that process?
I think the daily connections, just remaining committed to each other, to our relationship, being creative, being appreciative of each other, understanding the hardships that the other was going through. Steve suddenly had to be both parents and step in and do a lot more cooking than he'd done before. And, I sent him with a recipe book and please grate zucchini into the kids' meals so that, the boys are eating vegetables and little things like that. Yeah, look, we went into it with the expectation of like, hey, we'll see you in 10 weeks, right? We'll get through a school term. COVID's going to go. COVID has to go, right? This can't continue. None of us knew that it would continue as long as it did. So then it was like, okay, we're skipping Christmas. Let's move through the next school break and we'll see each other then. And that didn't happen. And I mean, it got to the point where I ended my contract a year early, right before the borders opened again. Had I known, I might still be in China now. We didn't know that was going to come to an end. So we made a really difficult decision. And by that time, Steve had been hired by the USTA, the United States Tennis Association here in Florida, and had moved the boys from Denmark to Florida the day before his green card was about to expire. So he entered LA, which is notoriously difficult to travel through, on a hope and a prayer that because our kids have US passports, they could come in. He doesn't. He could have been turned away. Ultimately, when my daughter and I left China, our green card applications had been lodged, but they didn't have an expiration date on it. And at the gate, at the airport in Singapore in transit, we were turned away and not allowed to board our flight, and ended up spending 3 days in the airport on the floor, just refusing to move. First of all, because we had valid COVID tests, and I was like, I'm not leaving the airport because I'm not going to my embassy because they were going to send me back to Australia to reapply, which takes 2 years.
Wow.
And I said, I haven't seen my boys for 2 years already. I'm not doing that. And eventually we just got on the next flight and then entered the US and they said, welcome home.
You're like
And
such a relief. My stomach just dropped for you.
it was really, it was, those are the times when you really have to pull all of your resources and your strength together and just say, okay, all right, this is going to happen somehow. And go against maybe what the authorities in those places are telling you at that moment and just stick with what your intuition says. So that was a pretty special, we were reunited in LA and before coming back out to Florida. And that was amazing. My boys grew taller than their dad in that time. And so that was the biggest shock. That was a guttural reaction at the airport. I cried and kind of wailed when I saw that. You see someone on a screen, you don't realize that.
Yeah. Oh my God, I want to cry. Yeah,
I
that's
did.
so
I still do.
emotional.
I look at my boys and think, I left you and you could fit in my lap almost as big boys, but I came back to young men standing way taller than me
Wow.
and missed that. And, similar for my husband and our daughter, there were things that her and I navigated getting through the worst of the lockdown in China. during COVID and, you know, the daily testings and things like that. I mean, for the most part, China was great. It was very different to what the rest of the world was reporting. At least our experience was. But yeah, so they missed that. You know, she graduated elementary school and moved on to high school without him being there to witness that as well. So that was tough.
And also to consider your families are also in different countries as well. So your family's in Australia, his family's in South Africa, you're in China, he's in Denmark. That's a lot of different COVID restrictions and regulations, a lot of different uncertainty of when am I going to see my extended family as well. That's just a lot of heaviness to deal with, especially when you're separated from your partner during that time too, and you can be relying on them for that. So that's, I mean, to be able to come through on the other side of this, it's truly a miraculous story. And it feels like the relationships, it sounds like to me, your relationship is such the solid foundation of the family that you guys have been through literal earthquakes, you've been through pandemics, you've been through being separated, you know, you've been through potentially not making it through the border, and to come through that on the other side and still have that love in that relationship just really speaks volumes to the connection that you and Steve have.
Thank you. Thank you. We feel the same way. And I think it's also indicative of, you know, people see border issues and visa issues as things as, you know, a certain demographic, and it's really, really not. Anyone, and you know, being in a relationship from different countries. And I think that that's something people who travel and you don't think you're going to meet the love of your life in a different country from a different country and live in a separate country again. I'm trying to explain that to the people in the Finland Home Affairs office when our kids have 3 different passports and our names didn't even match. I had to literally get my birth certificate changed so my name matched my kids' names so they could be registered as my children in Finland.
Wow.
Because they had to match the mother's name, and I just had never changed my name, which is quite common, but not there.
I always tell people, I'm like, look, it is going to be the most adventurous, passionate, amazing relationship of your life, but a cross-international relationship is just a lot of paperwork at the end of the day.
It is a lot of paper and patience.
And patience. So let's talk a little bit about that. What have you learned the most about yourself through this relationship? You mentioned patience. That's something that I'm actively working on every day. But what else have you really learned about your own, I guess, resilience and your own story, I guess?
That's a great question, and it really makes me reflect. What have I learned? I think I've learned that the most important thing to do in life is to follow your heart. And that would be my advice. I mean, I have given that advice and I have followed that advice. When you know, and just trust, things generally work out.
And I think that's kind of a hard thing to understand until you've been through it, because a lot of people don't know how to listen to their heart. They don't know how to follow their intuition. What does that feel like? Like, is there like a voice or a feeling that you get, or like what does that actually feel like for you to know that you are following your heart or following a fear?
I mean, I can only describe it as just a knowing and just an understanding and a trust. Like I just feel it. It's just everything inside of me says, like everything inside of me at Singapore airport said, do not leave the airport. Try and get on the next flight. Don't go. It's as big as that. And it's had my back during those situations where I've really been like, okay, I know what the right thing to do is. You know, I'm not a religious or a faith-based person, but I think, you know, when people say they ask God and God answers, then maybe it's similar to that. It's just having that trust in something that is omnipresent and can guide you.
That's really beautiful. And I think that's something that as people perhaps meet someone abroad or on a trip or even just in another state, even cross state can be hard sometimes. Even different cities in the same state can be hard sometimes. Is there any piece of advice that you would take to somebody who might have a little bit of fear around moving their life for someone? Or, you know, oftentimes we hear this story or this advice around, well, don't give up everything for this person because you never know, you know, it could be going on the opposite way. It could be going more towards the fear-based approach of you don't want to lose everything you've worked for. But on the flip side is you moving your life for somebody or changing your life for somebody could open up the world to you in ways that you've never imagined. What would you say to somebody that's kind of teetering on the edge of either one of these spectrums?
That's another great question. The most important aspect is you're not giving up anything for somebody. You are adding to something. And so it never felt like I was giving up something for my relationship, for my children, for a job opportunity. It was taking a leap of faith and jumping in and seeing. And we've faced lots of criticism. We have friends that don't talk to us anymore. How could you do this to your children? Why do you have to keep doing this? And you make sacrifices in a lot of other ways, right? We haven't settled. We haven't put all our eggs in one nice mortgage basket or anything like that. Those are the small sacrifices. But we have an acute understanding of the world, and we have an ability to be able to say, oh, yeah, we can pack up in a couple of weeks. And, we moved from Michigan to Finland in about 5 weeks of making the decision and getting on the plane. And it's possible. It's just possible. And if you believe it, go for it. Don't let anyone else's opinion sway you.
Yeah, leaning into the possibility instead of the
Leaning
fear.
in. 100%.
And speaking of your children, so you say you had friends or family who were like, why are you doing this to your kids? Can you talk about where your kids are now and the life that they're living now that potentially might not have been available to them had you stayed where you stayed?
Yeah, definitely. So our oldest is 20. He lives in Spain. He pursued his football over everything else, and he's in his second year at an academy out there. And so he's doing the same thing. He's taking chances. He's done hard things. I think what it's taught our kids is it's not a big deal to pick up and move to the other side of the world. It's not a big deal to challenge a visa process or to challenge take an opportunity that might feel a little bit difficult. Oh, I've got to go to an office in Miami, then the name is in Spanish. Okay. Well, let's figure it out. Let's just turn up there with the papers and get them translated. And okay, it's a process, but it's possible. And so that's where he's at, which is amazing for him. Our 17-year-old tennis player travels the world almost full time, playing high level tournaments. And he's just about to go out to Australia and live with Tennis Australia for a year or more before college. So he does online schooling. He'll finish high school in a year, and then he'll decide to go to college or go pro, maybe. We'll see where it goes. But he's playing all the Grand Slams and things like that. So that's been another big sacrifice, is that we have now, because we understand we gave these kids these big dreams, now that's a continuation of us supporting that and making that happen for them. And our daughter is finishing up high school in Florida. She's got another 2 years. And so she is embracing Spanish. It's very widely spoken here, and she's learning that at school. So she's adding her third language and keeping up Chinese and Finnish. I think it's been tricky for her because she went from the Finnish school system, which is beautiful, an incredible international school in China, now to navigating a local high school in Florida, where the caliber of pedagogy is not as high. But she has learned that she can make it in a social circle. She can, stand her ground. She can explain high-level geography and things like that, and from a first-hand experience. And she's brave.
Yeah, it's almost like there's the academic push of Finland and China, and then there's the social push of, okay, well, now how do I navigate these social scenes, which is an incredible skill set to learn in today's age of, kids got to learn how to be flexible, adaptive, global. It's not what it used to be. Like, there's a whole nother set of skills that are not being taught in traditional school that's going to be mandatory in a global workforce. That's now what we're seeing right now.
Absolutely. And that thinking outside of the box and being internationally minded and embracing diversity and things like that. Yeah, you're right. And education needs to transform. And I'm pretty lucky I work for a company that is, at the moment, is investigating that, or is not investigating, is doing that, is providing that for families. There is a whole network out there of families who are living a nomadic life and providing this international mindedness and cultural immersion for their kids.
I think that's a really great segue to wrap up the conversation, is to share what you're doing now and who you're doing it for, and maybe a quick shout out to your husband and say a couple words to him.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Steve, you're the love of my life. You know that. Yeah. And he is just amazing. He gets to do something he loves every day and has instilled that following your dreams in our children. And then a shout out to the company that I work for is quite unbelievable. It's a new company. We're in our third year, and it's called Boundless Life. And I shout that regularly from the rooftops. And what it is it's providing a transformative system of education for families who are choosing this lifestyle. And it's not only providing education, it's providing community. So as a family, for example, if your family wanted to go on the Boundless adventure, you would apply, you would come through me, And there's quite a stringent admissions process and an onboarding process. And basically you choose from one of our almost 7 locations. We open new locations every year around the world, and you arrive and you have an education center with a Finnish modeled Montessori based beautiful system of education that also integrates the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, because we need to figure those out. Kids need to be aware of those, as well as cultural immersion in the countries. And then you have a community, right? You have all of the other, usually between 25 and 30 families per location, per cohort, who are relatively like-minded, who've gone through the same sort of admissions and onboarding process. And you have experiences that Boundless Life has organized for you to do together as families. And then the opportunities to travel and really immerse yourself in that culture and that location on your own while the kids are at school, either if you're on a break from what you do, or if what you do, which so many people nowadays have jobs that they can travel with and that they're not location based.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you also love what you do.
I really love what I do. Yeah,
that's amazing. I'm so glad that you and Steve have found, your passions, and you're able to bring that to life within your work, within your family. And I just know everyone listening is going to feel really inspired by your story. I think there's a general theme of being able to take the leap of faith and doing that with a partner hand in hand, and the trust within the relationship totally stems out into the trust that the children feel. And I'm feeling really fired up from this episode. So thank you so much for sharing your story.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure and a lot of fun.
Yes,
thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that's a wrap for today's episode. A huge thank you to our amazing sponsor, And Beyond, for supporting the Passport to Love series. If you're dreaming of a unique honeymoon, a romantic getaway, or even a destination wedding, And Beyond has been creating transformative experiences for over 30 years across Africa, Asia, South America, and beyond. Visit andbeyond.com for more information, and stay tuned for the next episode in our Passport to Love series.